I just wanted to start today by centering the community activists and organizations who are really doing the work that we're going to be talking about here today. They don't have to proclaim that they're anti-racist because they just are, right? They are at their core focused on social justice and racial equity, or they're serving communities where they are, communities on the margins. So I just have a slide here with some examples for us to be able to see, and let's see if I can switch to the next one. There are many more organizations and people at work than these two slides really give you an idea of, but I wanted to give you some idea of what is the kind of work being done in our field, the really good work. So today I'll just be talking with you for a few minutes, and I will be drawing from this chart that you may have seen before. The title of it is Opportunities for White People in the Fight for Racial Justice. So before we kind of go to my little part where I'm going to share, I wanted to just sort of visit the disclaimer that's also at the top of this particular chart. And I'm referencing words that are in that chart, and so that's kind of where some of my language is coming from. But as you can see here, I don't normally read slides, but I do want to just read this because sometimes someone else says it better than you could if you tried to come up with it on your own, right? And so as you'll see the chart we're referring to, the authors refer to it very much as a work in progress, as so much of this work is. The chart was developed to support white people acting for racial justice. However, it really draws from ideas that were developed mostly by Black, Brown, and people of color, and has been edited by Black, Brown, and people of color. The author recognizes that the labels that we're going to talk about, actor, ally, and accomplice, are really oversimplifications, but really the goal is to challenge white folks like myself to go out of our comfort zones, take bigger risks, make some significant sacrifices, because that is what we have been asked to do by those who are most impacted by racism, colonialism, patriarchy, white supremacy, xenophobia, and hypercapitalism. So I agree with the author that for real change to occur, we really have to confront and challenge all people, policies, systems, and more that maintain privileges and power for white folks. So that's where I'm coming from as well. This is able to be referenced online if it's something you'd like to check out further. But really, in my case, I have had so many teachers, both Black and Brown folks, Indigenous folks, people of color, who have helped me to see white supremacy and racism. And for all of their unpaid work, I am so grateful. And that's a big reason why I thought of sharing my own self here today. And that's with the hope that I can relieve some of the burden that we too often place on our colleagues, our students, and our friends who are Black, Brown, Indigenous, persons of color, or otherwise part of a community on the margins. So I have learned so very much from two very important teachers in my life, and their photos are here with me as a little baby midwife down at the bottom. This was in, I guess, about 15 years ago in my little kitchen apartment in Seattle. Now I'm in Central Washington. My name's Kristen Heflin, by the way, hi. And I really just wanted to share my reflections with you here today as a way to get an interactive discussion going among us. There's such a great group of folks here. I'm so grateful. And I look forward to hearing from you all next. But I will first spend a few minutes sharing, and I hope that'll help stimulate some discussion. If that doesn't, I have a few other discussion prompts for us today. But as I'm talking, if you could please just take note of any of your own aha moments, questions, or reflections that you might like to share. I'm gonna speak from my own truth. You know, I was an activist from a very young age, you know, a bleeding heart for sure. And, you know, one of my early memories of myself is creating this video to educate others about the enslavement of Black people in this country. It was just something I couldn't believe had happened so recently in our history, and I just wanted to make sure everyone understood that that had happened and wasn't okay. And, you know, I definitely wanted to be a really good person. I really thought that racism was horrid. But for so long, and still, I didn't know what I didn't know. And that's how it is when you're, you know, a white person raised, you know, in a white community, mostly white community. And of course, I still don't know what I don't know. That will continue to be true. And I definitely haven't arrived anywhere. But yeah, I was gonna say, I haven't arrived anywhere, as my most recent mistakes of late would demonstrate. But I have been asked to be an accomplice before. And so I thought that I would like to talk with you a little bit about what that was like for me. So here are a couple bullet points that I feel like my lessons from, mostly they come from this time when I was working with my fellow students as a student midwife at Seattle Midwifery School, which is now merged with Bastyr University, where I teach. And at the time we created this organization, Student Midwives Advancing Cultural Competency, or Cultural Competence, which was the language, of course, at the time. And so SMAC, you know, we wanted to smack the school and work on racial equity and equity generally. So we came together and we did all sorts of things, from having a support group that we led for other students, doing some educational stuff for students. You know, we had a movie night with, you know, When the Bell Breaks, right? Because this was 15 years ago. And even though that movie still is applicable, right? It's been a while. But those are the kind of things we did, in addition to working to say, how can we ask this institution to be more accountable in these regards? And the first thing that I really, you know, would put at the top here is just that importance of relationship building. I know many of you already know this, but obviously so central and so huge, and just so primary, that my relationship with the three folks that I have featured here was beautiful and amazing, the most rewarding organizing work I've ever done in my life. And I, you know, some other folks have heard me say before, it is because of my two classmates featured here, who aren't among us today as midwives, that this work is so important to me, because they aren't here because of systemic racism, and it's not okay. We all know that story of students who would be really great midwives, really great doctors, and don't make it through, not because of their own, not because of them. It's not about them, right? They choose to not continue because of all of the things that we know are problems, in terms, you know, and systemic racism being huge among them. So for me, what it meant, you know, to be an accomplice, someone said to me recently, one of my colleagues said, oh, you need to be asked to be an accomplice. Like, you don't get to claim yourself as an accomplice. And I just thank you, Michelle Sarju, for saying that, because I just love when people help me to even see better the things there are to see out there. And these friends at the time that we were working together, I feel like they really did ask me to be an accomplice. And one of the things that we did, I think, in that role as the two white folks who were in this group that we formed, was meeting before the meeting. So we would have meetings with the school administrators, but we would all meet ahead of time and plan our strategy. And so that was really helpful, I think, in terms of being really effective, you know, kind of placing ourselves around the room, making an ask, you know, supporting each other in the asks that we were making. That's where the initial call, we asked for the People's Institute to be able to come in and to do anti-racism training for the students at Seattle Midwifery School at the time. And we did succeed in that particular ask. And then that later became, thanks to the work of Wendy Gordon and the leadership of Susie Myers and others, that became the anti-racism course, the really power and privilege course that is now taught at Bastyr and was taught at Seattle Midwifery School. And that's followed by a separate course for the midwifery students on cultural humility as well. So 2 separate courses in our professional issues series that all students were required to take. And from that is where came the requirement that all faculty had to do the Power and Privilege course, which for us is a 25-hour course. So just kind of, yeah, that's one of my lessons about how we were able to be effective and work well together. They taught me about how to use privilege to elevate voice and perspective, not my own, right? But centering the voices and perspective of those people who are on the margins, mostly often Black, Brown, Indigenous, and people of color. So, you know, kind of learning what it means to step aside, to listen and support. Sometimes I felt like my role was to translate white culture in order for us to be able to then disrupt it. And then also, especially for me, I'm like fast moving talker, to really learn to pause and ask questions before acting. For me, again, but it's also like white Western, you know, European culture too, to make sure to try to avoid being too solution focused, to making sure to really allow time, for this really hard and important work that we can't rush. I feel like learning to ask always what perspective is missing, and then and you can't always do that with the people in the room. Sometimes there's too many people or perspectives missing from the room to even ask what perspectives are missing, right? But trying to ask that question and work on that. For us, processing was huge. We had to spend lots and lots of time, which was part of our relationship building, but processing together. I had to spend a lot of time learning about how to try to avoid harm. I feel like I was taught how to pay attention and still learning about these things, right? But my teachers, I feel like were trying to help me learn about how to pay attention to who is given expert status in any space, in any meeting, in any course, in any program, right? Who are put out as the experts. And then I feel like I was asked to do my own work and to know that if I was doing my own work, that it would show, So those are, I can leave this up for a minute if anybody has any particular questions or thoughts about this, but I'm actually anxious to kind of get back to the gallery view to be able to see your faces better, and then to just start a discussion. And like I said, I can give prompts if needed. Let me go ahead and stop the recording so that people can feel comfortable sharing. Okay.